Welcome everyone, I'm Kim Bremmer, your host today for another edition of BoviNews, keeping you up to date on the cattle industry's latest in technology, management, genetics, and more. Today we have a great lineup of presenters to you as we talk about the opportunities for a beef on dairy genetics program. Our first presenter today is Simon Vander Woude. Simon is the owner, along with his wife Christine, of Vander Woude Dairy in Merced, California. They currently milk 3,200 cows 3 times a day. Simon was an early adopter of genomic technology and actively works to speed genetic progress while maintaining herd size. Simon began using beef genetics in his dairy herd in 2012. Welcome, Simon.
Good morning. My name is Simon Vander Woude. My wife and I own and operate 3 dairies here in Merced, California. We have Vander Woude Dairy, which is the home dairy, Dutch Door Dairy, and Grandview Dairy. A little history about ourselves. My parents started their own dairy in Ramona, California, down in San Diego County in 1971. So I was born and raised on that dairy. In 1994, my wife and I had the opportunity to start our own operation. So we didn't take over my parents, but we started our own. We started there in San Marcos, California, down in San Diego as well. We started with 150 cows. In 2005, my dad and I merged our dairies into Vander Woude Dairy, a brand new facility in Merced up in the Central Valley. We started with 1,200 cows and just kind of kept growing that. We had kind of a staged growth plan and got that up to 3,200 cows in 2012. Chris and I have since bought out my brother and my parents. Well, my mom, my dad passed away a few years ago, but we bought out my mom and my brother in 2014. In 2015, we added Dutch Door Dairy to our operations. That's a 650 cow dairy in partnership with my manager. And last year we bought Grandview Dairy, which is a 1,900 cow dairy. So our son just came home from college and he's actually working for us out there right now. So why use beef semen? That's kind of the impetus of what we're talking about this morning. Why would I use beef semen? And as you heard in my history from 1994 to 2012, I was in constant growth mode. We started with 150 cows. My dad was milking 500 at the time. He kind of stayed pretty stagnant, but I kept growing and we grew Vander Woude Dairy to 3,200 cows. And we got to a point in 2012 where we had 3,200 cows milking and 3,400 heifers. So we knew that that was not going to be a sustainable model. And genomics had been out. Zoetis had been out talking to us about it a few times. And so we basically gathered all the minds around a table and working with Zoetis and Genex, and came up with a strategy of how to use genomics to further the genetic progress in our herd and to right size our heifer inventory. So how did we come up with that strategy? Well, we figured we sampled all the heifers under 12 months of age at that point and used that information to determine which ones of those heifers would get sex semen and which ones would get Angus semen or conventional semen at that point. So how do we run our breeding strategy today? And this hasn't changed a whole lot from the beginning. We plan out how many heifers we want born every month. So at the beginning, it was just for the 3,200 cow dairy, and we could strategize that I want about 100 to 110 heifers born every month. We target a 30 to 33% cull rate. And if we can get better than that over time, we certainly will strive for that. But that's kind of where we are today. So we look at how many virgin heifers we have available to breed, because those are theoretically and in truth your most progressive genetics. They're just that much better than everything else you have in your herd. Then we look at how many cows we have available to breed every month. We look at the conception rates of heifers and cows, both from the previous month and the same month previous year. So there's a lot of factors that go into kind of this algorithm. We use the Genex calf math system, and they've been very instrumental in helping us work through this process. We also, factor in abortion rates, DOA rates, heifer program losses, animals that don't breed, that kind of stuff. So all those factors go into this calf math, and we strategize about how many live heifer calves we want born every month. So once we figured out how many we want, we go see what we have available. And from there, using all those factors, we'll know how many heifers we'll get from our virgin heifer population, how many need to come from the milking cows. So what has that done to our breeding strategy here at Vander Woude Dairies? We have a very consistent number of heifers born every month. We now can strategize that for all 3 dairies. So since we added Grandview last year, we went from 140, 150 heifers a month up to 230 is our target right now. 230 live heifer calves born every month is what we're looking for to replace all 3 dairies. We've seen a consistent gain in our net merit of our heifers. On my monitor report on Dairy Comp, I just have a little tab at the bottom that I made for myself of the average net merit of my entire heifer population. That's from day old to springers and anything that we have genomic tests on. And we see a pretty consistent 10 to 15 point jump just about every month. So that nets us 120 to 200 points annually in the average net merit of our lactation zero, our heifer population. It also put us into the beef business. We did not necessarily anticipate that. We started breeding Angus as more of a strategy to keep milking these cows longer and not necessarily replace our genetics, make our replacement genetics out of them, but it inadvertently put us into the beef business, which when we started breeding Angus, we were contemplating just selling them. We ended up keeping them and raising them. We maintain ownership of the calves through 550 pounds. We send them to a calf ranch for the first about 140 days, and then they come home and we feed them on site. So it was a learning curve trying to figure that out. We were pretty early in the process. We weren't the first adopters, but we were early adopters of this strategy. So what does our Angus feeding business look like? Well, today, like I said, the calves go to the calf ranch for about 140 days. We have a feedlot here at the home dairy. We had bought a ranch next door that had a little feedlot on it. I was contemplating just bulldozing it and turning it back into cropland. But about that time, we started getting these Angus back, and we didn't necessarily have room in our heifer facilities at the home dairy. And so we just have a little feedlot right down the road, and it's worked out great. I mean, it had a scale, a loading chute, squeeze chute, everything was there. So it worked out perfectly. As you can see from the slides, that business has continued to grow. I don't have data from earlier on. I wasn't necessarily keeping track of that too well early on, but for the last 4 years, you can see that the number of calves that we've been selling annually in 2017, 813, 2018, and then you see in 2019, we really jump up. And that was when we made another change in our breeding strategy. And in 2017, July of 2017, probably one of the hottest summers we've had here in California, one of the toughest breeding environments we've ever faced. We made the decision to go all sex semen in Angus. So we haven't used conventional semen on the dairy since July of 17. And again, our breeding strategy is constantly evolving. I surround myself with really smart people, and they give me lots of suggestions and ideas, and we chew on those, and working together, we come up with solutions and strategies to continue to move the program forward. So how do we market our Angus calves? When we started in 2013, we didn't really have a strong strategy. We didn't have a plan. We called around to a few different people that bought Angus Holstein crosses. We looked into the video sale option and called some auction yards. We ended up selling most of our calves to Grimius Cattle early on, and they continued to kind of win the bids to get our calves. And they were early adopters of this program as well, and they came in strong and wanting. They saw the value of this beef breed and wanted to be part of that. And I would argue that today they're probably one of the largest purveyors of Angus cross calves, and they buy them day old and finish them. So they're a large operation, and they've been very, very good to work with. They eventually came to us and said they didn't want to just be bidding all the time. They wanted all of our calves. They wanted to be able to plan on that. And so we did work out a deal with them. And then in 2018, they came to us and said, we want your calves, but we want you to use our semen. So they bought their own lineup of Angus bulls. They collect them here in California, and we do use their semen, and have had a very good relationship with Grimius cattle from the beginning, and it continues to go very well. So what does it look like being in the beef business with Angus cross calves? Again, I didn't necessarily plan on getting into the beef business, but here we are, and it's part of our business strategy of diversification. And so far this year, in a fairly depressed beef market with COVID and everything, we've been netting about $280 per head. Now that does not take into consideration a day-old price, so you would have to subtract a day-old price from that. But since I'm making these calves myself, I just kind of look at holistically, what do I gain from these calves, and we're able to do that with feeding them for about 200 days. So it's a fairly quick turnaround. A lot of dairymen will say, well, I'll just make extra springers and sell them. I can turn these Angus calves in 6 or 7 months and do that a few times before a springer is ready to go, and generally have a fairly decent profit per head on these. It also gives us the opportunity to utilize that for philanthropic purposes. We will donate cattle to different organizations, and it works well for tax purposes for us. Next year, we anticipate selling about 3,500 head. If you remember my earlier slide, we've sold about 2,100 so far this year, but we bought Grandview Dairy in December of 2019. We implemented a breeding strategy there of breeding the entire milking herd to Angus, and all the virgin heifers to sex semen. And so we will see pretty good growth in our beef operations over the next few years. And we're still having no problem meeting our objectives of making 230 very good genetic heifer calves every month. We do that through using some of the best semen we can get. We also do a lot of IVF and place a lot of embryos. And we have been continuing to progress in making great heifers, as well as growing our beef business. So it's been a two-pronged approach that has worked very well for us.
Well, thank you very much, Simon. Next up, we have Dr. Kent Andersen. Dr. Andersen is the Director of Technical Services, Global Beef Genetics for Zoetis. Dr. Andersen supports beef genomic testing, genetic evaluations, and related services. Following graduation from the University of Nebraska and Colorado State University, and prior to joining Zoetis, Dr. Andersen served as a Director of Education and Research and Executive Vice President for the North American Limousine Foundation. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks, Kim, and thanks for the chance to be with your viewers today. What I'd like to visit with you about briefly here are some fundamental principles that we call the 4 C's of beef on dairy crossbreeding. And Simon very effectively communicated how he's doing this in his operation. So this is perhaps just some of the principles behind what he's actually put to application. To begin, I'd like to just visit briefly about the benefits and the roots of crossbreeding, which of course began in beef many, many years ago. The 2 benefits really are hybrid vigor and complementarity. Probably with particular emphasis on complementarity as it relates to beef on dairy crosses. In other words, we're trying to blend the strengths of 2 different breeds whereby we complement one another. I'll mention also how we're exploiting hybrid vigor in beef on dairy crossing as well. I did get a kick out of the caption on the bottom of this slide out of the Kansas City Star newspaper, where clear back in 1962, we did not know yet what to call these Angus-Hereford crosses, Hergus or Angford. And so who knows what in the future we might be calling these various beef on dairy crosses. Next slide here just, I think, is meant to give us appreciation for the advantages on the fed cattle side relative to dairy. Typically, Holstein are quite uniform, and we have that working to our advantage. As Simon mentioned, he provides year-round supply. And so when we think about crossing and complementing dairy, we've got some real positives here to build on. And I think that should be kept in mind when contemplating what to cross the dairy with. We do, however, know that there's challenges with feeding dairy cattle. Normally, because of the selection for milk production and other dairy traits, these cattle have high appetite, and consequently, when we use them for beef production, their conversion and their cost of gain are not as beneficial as straight beef. They also have lower dressing percent because of less muscularity, and we have a problem with narrow ribeyes, and that if they fall into dairy type, packers can discount. And so when we cross them, we want to improve gain relative to dry matter intake, muscularity to improve dressing percent and carcass cutability, and make complementary crossings. The next slide here just hopefully pokes fun and illustrates that. So when we're thinking about the 4 C's of effective beef on dairy crossing, we want to improve feed conversion and carcass yield, and at the same time, maybe other traits as well. So the 4 C's, as we've characterized them, and it's a tug of war, if you will, between dairy producers and then post that, feeders and packers. Job one, of course, is we want to make sure we have fertile beef semen that gets females pregnant. And so we know there are differences among sires and conception rate, and many of the semen companies have evaluated that. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Especially if you're breeding heifers, we know that calving ease is an important consideration, and we have effective EPDs to make sure we get a live calf without any troubles. Again, we'll talk about that a little more in a minute. And then relative to all things feeding and packing, we want to produce cattle that are set up to have sensible costs of gain, and at the same time produce higher yielding carcasses that also get premiums. We know that there's both important within breed and across breed effects here, and we'll talk about that here as well, just so you have a feel for what breeds do things particularly well and complement dairy, and where they may not be as complementary. So to build on that, as it relates to conception, most of the semen companies now are actually evaluating differences in conception rate among sires, and that can be an important consideration. They can vary as much as 10% difference in conception rate. The only way currently to evaluate that is through test mating and actually measuring pregnancy records, and then characterizing the sire differences there are. Maybe one day we'll have a means by which to evaluate that doesn't require so much actual pregnancy testing. On the calving ease front, particularly as it relates to breeding dairy heifers to beef bulls, across most all of our populations, we have highly accurate calving ease direct EPDs and birth weight EPDs. And the combination of those two can sure impact both calf survival as well as cow uterine health post-calving. In our visits with the dairy customers that we work with, they really want an optimum birth weight. So they obviously don't want a calf that's too heavy that requires assistance, but also they don't want calves that are too lightweight and may be susceptible to various problems thereof. As it relates to cost of gain, normally when we think about selecting beef sires for complementarity to dairy, we think about bulls with high yearling weight EPD, but sensible dry matter intake EPDs. So we want to try to have as much of our cake and be able to eat it too. So we want them to grow, but grow efficiency and correct maybe that high intake, high appetite coming from the dairy side of the equation. At the same time, in the ideal world, we like to bend the top of the growth curve. So change the maturity pattern, the compositional maturity of the dairy by selecting those that have sensible beef bulls that have sensible mature weight and mature height EPDs. So bend the top of the growth curve to manage days on feed and carcass weight. Then when it comes to the carcass, we don't want to produce excessively heavy carcasses, oftentimes not a big problem. We do want to emphasize the ribeye area EPD to improve the muscularity, and that improves dressing percent as well as yield grade and percent cuttability. Depending on the end market specifications, some magnitude of emphasis on marbling EPD to be able to capture those carcass premiums is typically in order. And then we want to exploit some specific breed differences, particularly as we consider beef sires for use on Jersey. There we can exploit, say, the Limousin breed that has very strong muscularity and typically really good conversion and cost of gain and sensible dry matter intake. We anticipate in the not too distant future, both on the dairy side that's already available, we have GPTAs for calf survival and calf susceptibility to BRD. We anticipate down the road that might be available in beef as well. So typically in the industry, we see a variety of different crosses being used. And just to cover this quickly, historically, the Hogus cross, Holstein crossed with Angus, as Simon is doing, has probably been the most popular. We have the breeding to feeding program, the Beef Builder program that exploits Limousin and Lim Flex genetics, particularly on Jersey, but increasingly also on Holstein. We also have certain AI companies as well as Progentis and Transova that are taking advantage of both Sim Angus and Angus and stabilizer type crosses to complement. Typically those are selected for growth and muscularity as well as intake and end product carcass merit. So you can do keyword searches on those and find out more about each of those programs from the different AI companies and those entities. A word on the breed effects and complementarity to dairy. These data are from US Meat Animal Research Center. And you can see there where the Jersey and Holstein breed are characterized relative to milk production, calving ease growth, retail product, and marbling score, as are those main breeds that are used on the beef front for crossing: Angus, Simmental and Sim Angus, Limousin and Charolais. You can see there, depending on the type of animal you're wanting to produce and the performance desired in the feed yard and on the rail, and depending on whether they're Jersey or Holstein, this slide hopefully is meant as guidance to help inform the breed to choose that gets you to where you want to go. In order to help navigate that, and as we've worked with dairy customers such as Simon, Zoetis has just recently prototyped what we call our Beef on Dairy Index. And just to remind you, indexes rank animals for combined genetic merit across a variety of traits that contribute to the profit function, both the costs and the revenues from production. And so we use the relevant genomic enhanced EPDs from the beef breeds. We use some economic assumptions that are consistent with our industry partners, and particularly those used by the American Angus Association, who, by the way, have produced their own Beef on Dairy Index that I would also encourage you to explore. And then we also make some supply chain assumptions. So I wanted to share briefly that Beef on Dairy Index that we've prototyped and we're beginning to use to help our dairy customers make the wisest possible decisions as to which beef sires to use. The index can include the combination of these 4 categories of traits. We have prototyped it for one AI stud where we actually use the conception rate differences documented among beef sires. That's often not available. And so when it's not available, we basically rank beef sires across several breeds for the combination of those traits related to calving ease and birth weight in the second box down, those traits related to growth and maturity, being yearling growth, dry matter intake, mature cow weight, and height. And then on the carcass front, the ribeye area, marbling, and carcass weight EPDs also feed into the index. Our math would suggest that on average, very generally, as we think about beef sires to complement Holstein, roughly 20% emphasis each on calving ease and calf size, as well as carcass merit and size. with just a bit over half of the emphasis on those traits related to growth and efficiency, will generally yield the best profit as it relates to the beef sires that complement Holstein. So just to conclude real quick, and this is really just a synopsis of what Simon has put into practice. We really think that the most beneficial outcome for dairy producers is to synergistically figure out how to blend these different technologies for their production. Understand about the dairy inventory and the incoming heifer calves and optimizing that, right-sizing the inventories, I think what Simon referred to. We can evaluate them through genomic technologies such as Clarified Plus, combine that with reproductive technologies such as sex semen, and Simon also mentioned IVF and ET, and then complementary terminal crossbreeding and selection of the best beef sires to complement Holstein and Jersey. So with that, Kim, I'm going to conclude and turn the floor back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Andersen. And our final presenter today, Dr. Victor Cabrerra. He's a professor and extension specialist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Dr. Cabrerra combines applied research, interdisciplinary approaches, and participatory methods to deliver practical, user-friendly, and scholarly decision support tools for dairy farm management. Dr. Cabrerra.
Thanks, Kim. Very glad to be part of this conversation, this very nice panel. So I have been asked to talk about the economics and a little bit about sustainability of using beef semen on dairy. So we have been working on this on my lab for about 2-3 years in the time that the sex semen together with the beef semen have been increasingly being used on different dairy operations. So farmers nowadays have more options about their breeding choices. They can use sex semen, conventional semen, beef semen, but that will depend on the age or the lactation of the animals, the status of those animals, as well as the genetics, as we have been hearing in the previous talks. So in our mind, there are 3 main considerations in order to use the beef semen on dairy farms. And one important one on the top here, if you're following with the slides, is the replacements needed. We have heard from Simon that they have a target number of animals they need to produce every single month in order to maintain the herd size or even increase the herd size if that's the goal of the farm. So the farm management needs to decide how many animals they need to produce, and if they produce over the limit, probably they will need to sell those animals, or if they underproduce, they need to see if they have an opportunity to buy extra animals to maintain the herd size. So in general, beef semen is a good opportunity if we have more than plenty of animals being produced on the farm. We are we have enough replacements from within our herd. So the next thing is the performance of the herd. How good is the herd regarding to the reproduction performance? And that will affect using beef and sex semen, because we know, for example, sex semen will have a little less reproductive performance than the conventional or the beef semen. And then the other very important factor to consider in this decision is actually the prices. And in this case, 2 important factors are the prices of the calves we're gonna receive as income, and the price we're gonna pay as a cost for the semen, whether it is the conventional semen, the beef semen, or the sex semen. So we came with this term that we're trying to, to get across that we call income from calves over semen cost. In order to summarize, like ICOSC, similar to the income over feed cost that is very popular in the dairy industry. And that refers the balance between having enough return of our investment in this proposal. The investment is the sex and beef semen, which is different than the conventional we are normally using, and our extra returns should pay for that extra investment. So we have developed a decision support tool that is openly and freely available at my website, which is dairymgt.info. And this is an online tool that works directly on the web browser. We try to make it all our tools very simple to use. And the idea of this tool is basically to calculate what's the value of using beef semen on a dairy operation. And just briefly, I want to give you a taste, a glance of what this tool does. The first step actually is calculate the balance, the female calves required on the herd. In this example, for example, for 1,000 adult cows with 35% turnover ratio or culling rate and 20% of 21-day pregnancy rate and other factors there, as you can see, they will need to produce every single month 38 calves, right? So that's a very important first factor we need to consider, because that will depend on the type of semen we're gonna use in different groups of animals. The other thing we calculate internally on this tool is basically how many animals we have eligible to be bred in different states, whether they are heifers, first lactation, later lactation, first service, or later services. So this is calculated based on the general data the user enters, but the user has always the opportunity to override these numbers. And the next thing the user needs to do is actually define what would be the conception rate in each one of these different services times. Along with that, the user needs to define the expected females being produced by different types of semen, obviously in different services. And obviously, part of the decision will include, and part of the information that needs to be entered on this is the semen cost for different types of semen being used. The user has the opportunity actually to split each one of these groups of animals to be serviced for breeding in top and bottom, meaning that we can use different type of semen for the top animals, like for example, sex semen would be normally what it is decided. And for the bottom, we could use, for example, beef semen. We can do that selection, and we can test and try with the tool what's gonna happen economically and what's gonna happen according to our replacements being produced. And at the end, what the tool will do after we provide the value of the different calves that we will produce, whether they are coming from the conventional semen, the sex semen, or the beef semen, how much value we are producing from those animals, and how many replacements are we producing. If you remember from a few slides back, we needed 38 animals to be enough to maintain our herd size. And with our proposal of different breedings in different times, we are producing actually 45. So we have 7 extra calves, which is good. Normally farmers will want to have a little extra just in case of produced calves. But also the important thing here is we have that value I mentioned before, the income from calves over semen costs. And in this specific case, happens to be more than $4,000 for this proposition of breeding on that case. The user is welcome to change the numbers there according to the specific situation of the farm and find out the best options for their own goals. So we use this tool to do different scenario analysis. And we created a virtual farm with 1,000 cows, 35% of turnover ratio, 7% stillbirth rate. And we did this analysis for low, medium, and high reproductive performance, just to see what we would expect in each situation. And then for each one of the farms, actually, or for each one of the reproductive performance, we basically put in place different protocols of use sex semen, from non-use at all any sex semen to use a high amount of sex semen. And in some cases, to split the sex semen use according to genetics of the animals. And then in the next step, actually, for the rest of the animals, we had the option to use either conventional semen or beef semen. And we did a different proportions of use of conventional and beef semen, from not using any beef semen all the way to use 100% of beef semen on the rest of the animals. So there are situations in these scenarios in which the farm would be using only sex semen and only beef semen, not conventional at all, which, as we have seen, that's already an option in the dairy industry. Every time more farmers seem to be going that direction. So in this graph, I'm just showing like a summary of the potential outcomes we will have for a medium reproductive performance farm. And in this graph, we have 3 dimensions. One of the dimensions is the level of use of sex semen. The other dimension is the beef semen used. And the y-axis, the vertical axis, actually shows what's the income from calves over semen costs. As we can see here, within the outcomes, we have a sector of the graph that is marked with a red circle. The red circle indicates all those outcomes in which we had enough replacements available from the breeding protocol we selected. So basically, what we want to have is the highest income over semen cost and still have enough replacements within the farm. That's, we think, most of the farmers would be willing to do that, use beef semen to the level in which still we have enough replacements within the herd. Here, and that's why we put also the other scenarios in which actually there are situations where the farmer could have even a greater income from calves over semen cost, where there are not a balance, positive balance of heifers being produced within the farm. If there is a possibility to buy externally, there seems to be an opportunity actually to make more money from that. However, we know that's a situation that maybe is not heavily preferred by farmers because of many reasons, including, like, for example, biosecurity from buying external animals to the farm. So in conclusion, for low repro farms, actually the opportunities to use beef semen, which, as we have seen, comes together with sex semen normally, are very low indeed. In most of the cases, we found with current data that in most of the cases, the income from calves over semen cost is negative. So it's only positive when the calf values, the crossbreed calves, would be very high. For the medium repro farms, the picture actually changed heavily, in which there are many situations in which the income of calves over semen cost is high, and there is an opportunity to use both beef semen together with sex semen, even to the level of 50% or more of beef semen on the breedings. And finally, for the high repro farms, actually the situation changed even for better, even more, in which the proposal is to use high amount of sex semen, and in most of the cases, 100% of beef semen on the rest of the breedings. So basically the situation I mentioned before on using only beef and sex semen and not conventional semen anymore. In most of the cases with the high repro farms, with a very even conservative price of the crossbreed animals, the ICOS, the income from calves over semen cost, was always positive. So the main take-home messages from this part of the analysis is that semen strategies depend on the farm performance, important thing, and market conditions. Farm performance, the farmer has a lot of control on those, and market conditions that may change across time, and the farmer may not have as much control. So the beef semen has a great benefit, but in most of the cases will need likely to be combined with sex semen. And there would be a higher value if there is an opportunity to buy heifers from outside, but that will depend on the goals and the preferences of the farmers. Now, the other important thing we didn't include in the analysis economically is the fact that, as Simon, for example, mentioned, there would be a greater genetic progress by using sex semen and beef semen. The generation interval will heavily decrease by doing this kind of strategies of breeding. And that would have a huge economic value in addition to the one I was mentioned before. And the last thing I want to mention as a take-home message in this part of the analysis is the fact that the tool is openly available on our website. And the idea is every farm is different and the market conditions are changing constantly. So the idea is to use the tool constantly as these situations change. So now in the last part, I want to talk briefly about the sustainability of this proposition of breeding. And as we have seen, and this is data from Wisconsin indeed, in 2019, almost 20% of the semen being used has been from beef on dairy, and almost 20% also are sex semen. We expect in 2020, I don't have the data right here, that both should be over 20% of usage on the dairy industry, meaning that nowadays, less than 60% of the semen use on dairy farms is conventional, and that's decreasing. And so it seems like the trend is gonna be to use more and more of beef and sex semen on dairy cows. So what we did in order to look at this sustainability question is basically try to find out the break-even price of the crossbreed heads according to different reproductive performance of farms. Like in the previous case, from low to high reproductive performance. And in this case, we define the medium reproductive performance at 20%, 21-day break rate, the high at 30%, and the low at 15%. So the important thing I want to mention in this part is that if we have a high reproductive program, like 30%, we would need such a low price of the crossbred calf, $59 per unit per head, in order to still be a good proposition to be used on the farm. If we have a medium reproductive performance, we will need a higher price, but not a huge price. Indeed, in this case, $150 per crossbred. We know the price is higher nowadays in the market. But the picture changes completely if we have a low reproductive performance. We will need such a high price of the crossbred animal that maybe it's not worth to even think. And here in this case, that price would be about $700 per head of animal. So the next thing we did quickly here is we'll look at the data from the Food and Agricultural Policy Research Institute at the University of Missouri. And actually what they do is a projection of what they think would be the price in the future. They look the past 20 years, historical beef meat price, and they actually project for the next 10 years. And actually this projection goes until the year 2029 in this case. And what they are projecting, the bottom line in this figure is that there seems to be that the price of meat, which will affect the price of the crossbred calves, will actually increase, not as much as in the past, recent past years, maybe, but it will increase. And therefore, it means that the sustainability of producing these crossbreds will likely continue for the next 10 years or so. So just a brief take-home messages and finishing up here in the presentation is we seem to have a good market conditions for the next 10 years or so. The other thing I want to mention, and I haven't discussed because of the brevity of the presentation, is that we need to produce, as a dairy industry, quality crossbred calves. There has been this huge demand, and dairy farmers have taken the opportunity to produce, which is great. However, in order to maintain this sustainable production of animals, I think we need to take a conscious role on producing good quality crossbred calves in order to maintain and open a niche and maintain that niche in the marketplace. Again, we have the tool available on the website for those of you who would like to use in order to improve or project this decision-making into the future. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Victor. So we're going to move into some questions here for the speakers today. I think I'll start with Victor, since you just finished up.
Sure.
So is there a situation where beef semen could be effective without the use of genomic selection strategies? Do you see one?
Yes, great question. Thanks, Kim. The thing is, as I mentioned during the presentation, the use of beef semen, it is heavily related with the sex semen, and therefore the selection of animals to breed with different semens, it's critical in this decision. Somehow we need to rank the animals or split the animals in some way or fashion on the farm in order to provide different semen to different animals. That's the goal. However, in my mind, the use of genomic tests, it's very good because we have a value of the animal at the very early start. And that prompts, I'm a little familiar with Clarified, for example, that prompts, and we have been using for years in our farm at the University of Wisconsin, that prompts to select the animals early in their life, which is a great value indeed. If we do that, actually, somehow it conflicts with the use of beef semen because basically we're gonna actually do the selection early on and we're not gonna raise more than what we need on the animals. So it is maybe the best decision would be actually to use the genomic together with sex and beef semen indeed. So I think that's an area in which we are now trying to enter more into analysis on that respect.
And from a financial perspective, does the beef on dairy practice fit into any dairy? I know you talked a lot about incorporating sex semen. Are there any other baseline management practices that dairymen need to have in place before they consider a program like this?
Yes, I think the critical point for using beef semen is the fact that the farm is able to produce enough replacements from within the farm. That's, in my opinion, a critical first step in order to think on using beef semen, for example. And so therefore, reproductive performance is a critical factor. The better the reproductive performance on the farm, the more opportunities will open for sure. So if something can do the farmer to do that is improve reproductive performance. Now, there is another factor together with reproduction, which is the culling rate, right? And they go somehow hand by hand. In my opinion, the reproductive performance is much more important than the culling rate, but the culling rate obviously will affect the demand of replacements we have on the farm. It is not uncommon in good reproductive performance farms, they may even have a higher culling rate because they do have the opportunity to do so, to select better the animals. So to summarize, in the bottom line, I think the most important thing farmers could do is improve reproductive performance for the heifers and for the adult cows, and that will open opportunities to use sex, beef semen, etc.
So along those lines, Simon, can you talk to us about your culling practices? Do you cull heifers to manage inventory, or does your cull rate fluctuate, or does it stay consistent? How does that fit in your program?
Oh, I'd love to say it's consistent every single month, but that's not true. So, you know, when we started clarified, again, we were going to cull the bottom end of our heifer population just because we were at a point where we already had too many heifers for our needs. We didn't end up doing, we sold a few, but ended up just holding on to them, which worked out well because my brother bought another dairy. And so he just took a bunch of our inventory to that dairy, and it worked out really well. The Lord works in mysterious ways sometimes. So, but you know, yeah, my goal is 30 to 33% cull rate. We've been hitting that. The dairy we bought last year was a little higher, a few surprises there. So, you know, it's good to have targets, but targets don't relieve you of the responsibility of the day-to-day decision-making that needs to happen on a dairy. And all of these strategies, when implemented, just require more intensive management and in all aspects of the operation. You know, whether it's lowering your calf death loss, or, you know, improving heifer growth rates, improving breeding strategies, improving reproductive performance. But we've been very aggressive on mastitis. I would say we've gotten to a point where we have more voluntary culls today than we used to. And that's part of breeding a healthier herd. Genetically, we've been breeding for health. And so all those things just come in, you know, there's an opportunity around every corner still. So as I think we do a good job today, there's always opportunity to get better.
And what percentage of your herd is bred to beef?
So I just looked at that this morning. Our pregnant inventory right now, so over the next 9 months, 42% of the calves born will be Holstein and 58% will be Angus. And that will still get us, that'll still give us enough heifers with a cushion. If I really wanted to dial down the heifers, I could. My manager gets a little nervous about me doing that. So we negotiate and come up with a number that I need with a cushion.
So along those lines, Kent, what percentage of beef genetics is in use in dairy operations today, and how has that changed how AI companies market beef semen?
That's a good question, Kim. I can only answer that from the perspective of the communications that we have with our partners in the AI industry. And those communications would generally indicate that particularly over the last year or two, there's probably been more beef semen going to the dairy than there is beef semen being used in beef. So my best guess would be probably over half of the beef semen produced is now being used in dairies.
And how did you decide, Simon, on the beef breed that you use? And have you ever thought about changing breeds? Where are you in your thought process on that?
Yeah, so when we started in 2012, Angus was kind of the only thing out there. That's what people were doing. It had been done, you know, guys using an Angus bull for cleanup and that kind of stuff, and their heifers, you know, back in the day. Maybe it still happens today, I don't know, but not at my place. So Angus was kind of the one that seemed to be working for some other dairies. And so we implemented that. We're in constant communication with our buyer, with Grimius Cattle. Do you want straight Angus? You know, we can place embryos. We have that capability on farm today with our IVF program. Do you want sex semen going into the calves and make all steers? Do you want Limflex, Sem Angus? So we stay in constant communication with them, and we have all these capabilities, and they still want that Angus Holstein cross. And so that's what we're going to provide for our customer.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything is market driven. Kent, do the dairy beef crosses qualify for entry into branded programs when we look at things like certified Angus beef? Has there been any development of a branded program for beef from dairy and beef crosses, or are we still going to be focused on the black calves?
Good question, Kim. They sure can. And regardless of whether you're using Angus or other beef inputs, maybe we need to add a 5th C to the 4 C's on beef on dairy crossing, and that being color. Obviously, if you can make them black, and I would also offer, most of the time those sires are homozygous polled, you can set them up for potential qualification into those programs. Certified Angus beef would have a brand requirement that they must be of beef type muscularity, but I think that can be navigated by use of the right beef sires, be it Angus or other. And then there's many other Angus-based programs besides just CAB that we can set those animals up to be eligible for and to receive premiums from. To the latter part of your question, I'm not aware of specific branded programs exclusively predicated on beef on dairy crossing, but I know that there's many of those crosses going into various programs, and I wouldn't be surprised if such might emerge in the future.
And Simon, have you had any feedback from your buyers on carcass values? Have they changed what they're asking from you?
Yeah, and that's part of the reason that they bought their own sire lineup, is the feedback we got over the first few years. So we started in 2012. We probably started killing these in 2014, 2015. And so they have a lot of carcass data. Today, they get sires on every single calf. And so they're following that through to the floor and evaluating their lineup. But yeah, the feedback we get is how we ended up with them getting their own sire lineup and wanting us to make more calves for them with their sires.
And Kent, has the increased population of the dairy beef crosses affected the beef supply chain?
Well, I think it has, yeah. So Cattle Facts tends to try to track and quantify the proportion of the harvest that's, say, beef versus dairy. And increasingly, we have this element that is indistinguishable. So historically, 15 to 20% of the fed cattle supply has been classified as dairy. That's a bit on the bottom end of that range now from my visibility. And so I suspicion that there's more and more of these beef dairy crosses going through the system that are indistinguishable from beef. And so that's certainly affecting the efficiency of the supply chain on the fed cattle and the carcass side.
And Simon, I think our last question today is going to be, looking back over the years that you've been using beef semen in your program, is there anything that you would have done differently or wish that you'd known earlier when you started?
No, I don't think so. I think I've always been a fairly collaborative guy. I surround myself with people that are going to challenge me and think outside the box. And yeah, looking back, maybe go to sexed Angus right out of the gate. I mean, that has been a game changer for us. It has been phenomenal. It's great to the bottom line. It's great for the genetic program. We have very few calving issues anymore because it's all either a crossbred Angus or a heifer calf. There's very, very few Holstein bull calves being born on the dairies anymore. And so aside from that, no, it's a fluid business, just like the dairy business. It continues to evolve. It continues to get better. And we're always looking for ways to do it better. And so I wouldn't change too much about what we're doing. And I think it will change over time, but I don't know what that's going to look like yet.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. My thanks to the three of you, to Simon, Kent, Victor, for sharing your insight, expertise, and knowledge today. And I look forward to hosting the next edition of BoviNews.